I'm now going to ask Riss to come up, and she's going to introduce her panel who are part of the Young Trailblazers. But can I just talk about Riss being a trailblazer? We are lucky to have a lady of her capability, her integrity, the respect that she's earned across the industry, the fact that she flipped a conversation with Hilary Barry and started interviewing Hilary was amazing. And the work that she does behind the scenes for the FSC in her own right and her own brand, but particularly for this, and getting to the point that we have a declaration now from the FSC that we've all got to buy into, we've all got to respect and we've got to move with, is a lot of the contribution of Riss. So I want to call up this young trailblazer, Riss.
Oh, hello everyone. It's great to see so many of you here in person today, and I just want to say thank you, Tricia, while she dashes off to her next commitment. Did anyone know that Tricia was called by the FSC on, I think it was Tuesday this week? Monday, maybe, to step in. You did a fab job. You couldn't tell it all. I was a bit nervous when Frances emailed me on Monday saying she was feeling under the weather. We went, right, we've got to find someone who can step in to the MC role, and Tricia just jumped straight in, put her hand up, and yeah, so lucky to work with people like that here at the FSC. Our community is just absolutely fantastic, so thank you so much, Tricia. So tēnā koutou katoa, my name is Clarissa Hurst, or Riss. I just want to say, following on from that last panel, I've been at the FSC now for about 2 years. I didn't come from the financial services industry. I come from a content and communications background. I'd like to think that's where I bring the most value to this role, into this campaign. And it was so refreshing to hear Sarah from Musa say that so many of you don't understand PDS documents, because I certainly don't. So thank you for bringing that up, because I feel much better. So I'm now going to transition into my role as facilitator of this next session, which is featuring some of Aotearoa's best and brightest young trailblazers. When I was first thinking about this session, what I was really looking for was a panel of speakers who could really step up and challenge the financial services industry to think and consider about what more we could be doing, what we could be doing differently, what we could be doing better. As Push has been saying, we've run this campaign over 3 months, but what more are we going to be doing after we leave the room today? And that's what I'm challenging this panel to challenge all of you to do and think about. So I know this is the final session for today. Some of you might be feeling a little bit tired, a little bit restless, but hang in there, because it's absolutely going to be worth it, and you're not going to be disappointed. So in no particular order, I'm going to welcome here today, first of all, Menorah Coombe. So come on up, Menorah. Menorah is an improvement project manager at Auckland City Hospital. Raised on Niue Island, she is a proudly Pacific wahine who is dedicated to creating equitable access to care. People are Menorah's priority. She firmly believes that advancing the outcomes for vulnerable populations will advance the outcomes for all. And Menorah is also one of the YWCA's 2022 Y25 Young Leaders. So congratulations and welcome. All right, Simran Kaur, I see you up the back. Come on down. Thanks for joining us. Sim and her co-host Sonia, I'm sure you all know and love. They are globally recognised investing experts on a mission to make the world of investing less intimidating. Their podcast, Girls That Invest, quickly became the world's #1 investing podcast for women who wanted to learn about investing without the jargon, something I can definitely get on board with. They've been featured in Vogue, and their 100,000 strong Instagram following, I think that number's out of date now, I feel like it's much higher now, quickly demonstrated the need for more investing education, tailored to help tackle the wealth gap women are facing. And Sim has a new book out as well, so congratulations and welcome to the stage. All right, Sarah, Kelsey, come on down. host of the One Up Project, which is a personal growth and money podcast aiming to educate everyone on the things we were never taught but should have been. Sarah's intention is to help the audience make better decisions relevant to their finances and their lifestyle, and be the relatable and trusted voice that aligns them with effective resources and networks. Welcome, Sarah. And finally, we have Rina West. Come on up. You've got a fantastic bio here. I think it's the best one I've read yet, so hopefully I do it justice. She's written it herself. It's amazing. Raised in the bosom of her iwi, Te Arawa, Rina is the physical manifestation of her ancestors' wildest dreams. An ex-New Zealand basketball representative and stalwart member of the Rotorua community, as the face of Rotorua, Rina recognises the importance of giving back to the communities who raised her. A fierce advocate for wahine and Maori rights, Rina knows inherently the positive impact representation and resourcing can have, especially on lower decile communities. Rina actively works toward more equitable outcomes for Māori and invites you to rise to the challenge with her. And like Menorah, she was also recently announced as one of the YWCA's 2022 Y25 Young Leaders. So welcome to the stage. All right, I just wanted to give each of these panellists the introduction that they deserve. So sorry for taking so much time with the intros, but I think it's hopefully worth it. As with the other sessions, head to slido.com and enter the event code, submit any questions that you have for any of the panellists, and I'll try to get to as many as possible. I apologise if we don't get to cover all of them. Right, now after those introductions, when we had the briefing session over Zoom or Teams or whatever it was for this session today, we were talking quite a bit about representation. And I might start with you, Sim, and then also maybe get your thoughts, Rina, from a slightly different perspective. How important is it, Sim, how important is representation in the financial services industry, so in our banks, insurers, financial advice practices, and how will better representation lead to better outcomes for our wahine?
That's a really good question. I guess representation is a lot more important than I used to understand when I started out in my role. And, initially when I was younger, I didn't have a financial background whatsoever. And I always thought, it's for a certain group of people and I'm not part of that group. And therefore, I'll just leave it up to someone else to take care of, which works for a little while. And then afterwards you go, well, wait, I kind of want to be more in control of my finances. I kind of want to understand things better, but I just haven't seen someone that looks like me that's doing it. They're probably there. They're just, not front facing. I can't see them as often. So it would be nice to know if people like that existed, and therefore I'll feel a little bit more comfortable to get out there and learn things myself. And so with what we do, Girls That Invest, two young women, with two women of colour that we talk about our investing, our personal finance, and we didn't realise at the time, but it just resonated with a lot of people purely from the fact that we looked like those certain groups of people, and that made me realise that if you have representation in lots of different ways, it doesn't have to just be, someone's face on an ad, people really resonate with that and they hold on to it, and they'll come back to you and say, I've come along because I saw myself through your company or through your brand in some way. Even if it's not the exact kind of face, it's just the feeling of these people are like me. And if you can relate to your customers or your audience in some kind of way, that representation really holds on, and they really stick by you for it.
And I'm guessing from your perspective, it's not only about, you mentioned sort of marketing and branding, like having different faces there. It's also about the people that you talk to when you pick up the phone and you call them, and that kind of thing too, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's not just, the person that's on the screen or the person that's up here speaking. It's the people that you interact with every day. And it's interesting, you'd think that people just care about service or they just care about a good outcome, but they also care about who they're talking to and what that means. And yeah, it really adds up.
Yeah. Rina, I'm wondering if you have anything to add. I know you come at this from more of a grassroots perspective. How important is representation to the communities that you work with?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Kia ora everyone, lovely to see you all today. I feel as though, to me, the answer seems obvious. Representation is so important. When I look around the room, it's great to see so many women, but I do think that the ones that could benefit from hearing this kōrero are those males that dominate the spaces and that don't really give room for people like me to voice our opinions in boardrooms. So when I think about representation, the importance to me is when you're wanting to reach those communities who could really benefit from your services, you need to be hiring from those same communities. If you're wanting to reach people in low decile communities, you can't expect to reach them over Zoom. Sometimes you can't even expect to reach them over a phone call. Some of them don't have phones. You've got to go into those communities. And to know the needs of those communities, you need to be in touch with those people. So for me, it seems like it's a very straight line. If you're wanting to reach those communities, go to those communities. And it seems black and white to me. But when I think about my upbringing, I've been working since I was 13 years old, and the topic of this really got me thinking about my financial journey. Just as an individual, as a Māori who grew up, my parents have never invested. I've never really had that kind of education from my parents. It's been quite a lot of self-learning. And when I was about 18, just before I was heading to uni, I went into a bank, I won't say which bank, and I had about $10,000. I'd saved up all my money since I was working since 13 years of age, and I said to them, I want to invest, I want to be better, I want to broaden my horizons, can you help me? And they said to me, come back when you've got a couple more zeros on the end of that $10,000. And I actually hadn't remembered this until this morning. I'd kind of bottled it away. I'd gone to uni, I'd spent 4 years at uni just slogging away. I hadn't invested any money, and then I heard of Sharesies. But I thought, how easy would it have been if, okay, I couldn't invest in a bank, but they had taken the time to understand where I come from, the knowledge that I had, which at that time was quite minimal, and could give me access to resources that I could use straight away. And so for me, that's where the importance of representation is. The person that I spoke to at that bank, he was male, he was a lot older than me, and he probably just saw this young Māori woman come in and thought, you're clueless, like how do you come in with $10,000 wanting to invest? But for me, it was a huge step. It was me trying to step out as an adult, it was me trying to do better, and it was me trying to make something of myself. So when you see people in these communities that you're reaching and they're not quite there or they don't quite have the resources, I really do urge you not to look at what they don't have, but to look at how far they've come, because it's in that power there that you can really start to empower change. And for me, that's really the root of why representation is so powerful.
Yeah, that's a really disappointing story to hear. Do you think that in the time since you experienced that, you mentioned Sharesies, and we've now got these micro-investing platforms that allow you to just, you can invest $1 or $5. Do you think that is helping pave a way for, more people that maybe don't have $100,000 to actually invest and take control of their financial freedom?
Definitely, I definitely do. But I think one of the most powerful things is social media. And through Sim and Sarah's podcast, those are amazing. 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't have access to any of those. So if I wanted to do self-learning, you're looking at huge theses on finance, on how to invest. The barriers were huge, but now it's so easy. You can just go on YouTube, you can go on Spotify, you can go on Instagram, and you've got information at your fingertips. So it's empowering those platforms like Sarah and Simran, if we've got any investors in the room that want to sponsor them. It's empowering these platforms that can really reach those communities that you're wanting to reach as well. And you shouldn't look at it as competition, because we're all striving towards that same goal.
So I'll get to you, Sarah and Sim, shortly, because I'm really interested to hear your take on those comments and how, the role of social media and podcasts like the ones that you have in educating the next generation. But just before we do segue into that, just still sticking with the topic of representation, I'm keen to hear from you, Menorah, and also Sim, because you, Menorah, work in the health services industry, the healthcare sector, and Sim, I know you sort of come from that background as well before you became this amazing global phenomenon with Girls and Best. What learnings do you think that we could take from the healthcare sector and things like the rollout, the COVID-19 vaccination rollout, for example, that I know we talked about the other week? Menorah, I'll start with you.
I guess to me, the value that underpins representation is that it provides access or exposure to futures that would have otherwise been impossible. Something that I think the health sector does really well is engage with our rangatahi about futures. Oh, I do love Britney Spears. That's how you know you're at a women's conference, hey? Sorry, coming back to healthcare. Something that I think the health sector does really well is engage with young people early on in their journey. There are a myriad of programs available to young people in order for them to connect with the health sector and vice versa. One that's really close to my heart is called the Health Science Academies. And so I joined that when I was 15 years old. It's a program that I guess tries to support or encourage Pacific people to realise a potential career in the health sector. And I'll never forget sitting in an auditorium in my high school, and we met a phlebotomist, we met a psychiatrist, we met a geriatrician, all which would just sort of seem like jargon to you from the finance sector, but it was gold to me because it sort of built this sentiment within me that said, if you can do it, I can do it, particularly because they looked like me. And so I think something that the finance sector can take away from the health sector in regards to representation is to, one, go out into communities in the same way that the COVID-19 vaccination was so successful, vaccination rates were so successful in Pacific communities, is because they engaged with churches and they engaged with community members. So I think going to communities, engaging with them and starting when they're young is crucial, and I think that's something the finance sector can learn from the health sector in regards to representation.
And Sam, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I just wanted to add on the fact that I also came from a healthcare background. So in my past life, I was an optometrist, so very different. But what we learned and what we were taught was the idea that in the health sector for a long time, Māori health was quite poor, and people from rural backgrounds had quite poor health outcomes because it just wasn't that reach to them. And so the healthcare system thought, well, what can we do to reach these people better? Can we go into their communities? They tried that, worked for a little bit, but nothing was quite sticking. And the thing that worked was increasing the amount of doctors that came from the backgrounds of the people that they were trying to reach. So more Māori and Pacific Islander doctors, more doctors from rural backgrounds, and then suddenly more people from those areas and those communities started turning up to their GPs because they saw someone that looked like them and they saw someone that they could maybe be a little bit more comfortable with. There was less of that, concern. They feel quite intimidated. You don't look at yourself and go, I'm an intimidating person, but you never realise, how someone else might perceive you. You wear a nice outfit and suddenly you look unapproachable to certain groups of people. And so by having these people in the communities that were working in healthcare that were just being themselves, it increased health outcomes for so many populations, and it was amazing. And if we can bring that, into other areas like the financial sector, if we're trying to reach certain groups of people, that representation thing, it really helps. It's surprising how simple it is, but it really helps.
All right, some lessons there for all of us from the healthcare sector. Take notes. I'm going to segue now into the conversation around financial education and the role of social media and what, Rina, you touched on just before. So, Sarah, I'll ask you this question. What role does financial education play and who should be responsible for driving and delivering this education?
Well, I think from my experience, having had this podcast, accessibility is the most vital part, and that's accessibility to the information itself and of the information. And I think those are both two very different challenges, not issues. And I think that trust is a massive part of that, and that's what's so valuable about having, to the girls' earlier points, representation, because that builds a lot of trust within communities. When they see people they recognise doing different things, my story is only going to relate to so many people. And a practical way that I think you can start to build that trust is through storytelling, and that's what I try to do with the podcast, is tell at least my story. And I guess an example of how that trust is built through doing that is, and Sim, you probably spend a lot more time than I do doing this, but I'll spend, between half an hour to an hour every day just in my DMs answering extremely lengthy questions and comments about people's just lives, and having conversations just generally about anything to do with finance, personal development, whatever it is. And I guess that's because there's been a level of trust built up through my wanting to be vulnerable, and as vulnerable as I can, and I try to challenge myself to be open with those stories and be vulnerable, so that I can create that accessibility to the information, and then of the information, of course, is through building that trust again with making the information itself something that people can understand and bringing in a wide range of perspectives. And I think when it comes to whose responsibility is that, I would say that it's the responsibility of everyone who's passionate to create change in this area to step up and try to create that accessibility. And I say that word over and over and over, but I think it's because there is a lot of depth to what accessibility actually means, and it's not just putting out a blog and thinking, cool, we're educating people. Like, it's more about what is the content of that blog, how are you getting it out to certain people, is that even the right media or the right format to resonate with the audience we want to resonate with, and building those relationships. And I guess an example for me, I was never that financially literate growing up, and my parents were always like, yeah, save money. Cool, we've taught you how to deal with money now, go on. And it wasn't until I was interning at PwC, of all places, I worked in accounting, and now I definitely do not work in accounting. But I was interning with someone, and I was from, I guess, a low decile school, a community where not many people were talking about money and not having a lot of it anyway. And so when I went into this corporate internship, I spoke to one of the other interns, and he was like, oh yeah, have you changed your KiwiSaver fund? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, the money, and then you change your rate and your work pays for it. And I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And then I went and I went in and I told my dad, I was like, oh yeah, I'll enroll into KiwiSaver now that I'm working. He's like, why would you want to give your money to the government? And I was like, oh, so I can't trust the government either. Okay, cool. It wasn't until I spoke to someone, I guess, that I could relate to in this internship that I then realised, oh, maybe there's other people who I can trust with that information, and then go on and change it. And then eventually I went, sorry, Dad, I am going to give my money to the government, which is a huge misconception about KiwiSaver that people have. But anyway, and through talking about it more, it was like more people had this experience. And, you realise, something I've realised, I guess, over time and giving out information, is that to never assume that anyone knows anything. Like the first episode I did about investing, I started with explaining what a share actually is, because it's who knows and what does that even mean. So I think never assuming that anyone knows anything with accessibility, starting there, and then, making it, I guess, actually relevant to those people you're trying to talk to.
And do you think there's a role for schools and teachers in financial education?
I think there's definitely a role in that, but I also think that I wouldn't put the responsibility all on teachers and that expectation that they're the ones who need to be responsible to introduce this education to us. I think to Dr. Push's point actually earlier, she was saying that sometimes, we're talking about these issues, and we should be reframing them as challenges, but also sometimes we're like looking at the wrong thing. We should be thinking more high level about how this is actually, like what the issue is here, and then how we can address that. So I guess, I have my ideas, but haven't been in this space very long, so yeah.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying about accessibility, and also I think you being so open and sharing, your personal journey as you go is, something that a lot of people can connect with, particularly, I guess, people that are, similar in age and maybe women. But I know you've got sort of older audience members as well, like parents of kids and things. But as you said, your story is only going to resonate with so many people. So how do you then go about choosing, people that come on to your podcast and selecting those guests to ensure that you are, I guess, giving a platform to different perspectives and different journeys?
Yeah, it's definitely about being conscious and intentional with who I'm talking to and having conversations with. And I guess I'm constantly learning, because of course my perspective is only as wide as my own experience and my own worldview. And so I have been consistently trying since starting this podcast to widen that worldview and that perspective as much as possible through talking to these people, so that when I'm talking, I sort of carry a little bit of that with me. But I can, again, only do it so much. So going about pulling people on is definitely just reaching out to the industry in general. And it's also not about necessarily sharing the voices of those in the industry who are knowledgeable. In fact, I prefer to interview people who don't know anything and come on with their perspective and their experiences, because I think that that's when the value comes out, because that's when the core kind of miseducation or lack of understanding really starts to prevail, because you can see where the issues are. So yeah, I would recommend, I guess just a side note for people who are in this industry and have, a team, to look to those who know the least, because they're probably going to add some of the most valuable contributions.
No, I really like that idea. Sim, I don't know if you have anything to add on the whole the role that your podcast Girls That Invest plays in educating women about investing specifically.
I feel like Sarah covered it really, really well. There's only, you want to go out and you want to relate to everyone, but you're just going off your experiences, and that's why it's so important to have other people come on and share theirs, and speaking to those that don't actually know a lot is really interesting, because what we find with our episodes is we would interview a lot of seniors, people that have done amazing things, and then our listeners would say, we kind of want to hear from everyday people. We kind of want to hear from those that are like us, that didn't really know what they were doing, but they found their way. I was a little bit different from Sarah. I had the privilege of going to a very good school in New Zealand, and even in that school, financial education wasn't provided. It was just not something that we had access to. We had access to, everything else, and it was amazing, and, a lot of privilege in that school, but you just find that it is lacking in our systems. And the only financial education I got was a piggy bank that came from one of the banks. They came, and you know the ones. And it was great, and I still have it, but I don't recall a single thing I learnt from that assembly. And I agree, teachers shouldn't be the ones that have to take on the burden of trying to teach us financial literacy, but you might recall, Harold the Giraffe and other kinds of services that are funded, that come into schools, that give kids foundations on certain topics, whether it be health or drugs or whatever it may be. I think finances could fit in that kind of category.
Now, obviously, this campaign has been all about women, but I'm very aware that women, we're not a homogenous group. We don't all think the same and have the same perspective, and we come from very different backgrounds. And so my next question, and Sim, I might get you to answer this one first, is what are some ways that the financial services industry can better engage with all women from different backgrounds, including women of colour, Māori and Pacifica?
I think sort of taking on from what we did, so a little bit about myself, if you don't know, we started a podcast that started to reach out to certain groups of people about personal finance and investing, and it grew a lot quicker than we expected it to. And a lot of people ask us, well, how did you reach all these women so quickly around the world? And I often think about it, because it wasn't intentional, but I guess what we did is we made sure that we were answering questions that we used to have when we first started. Because, when you go to a lecture and the lecturer is so knowledgeable, but you just can't relate to them because they know so much, they just assume everything is, to them what it is to you. And so the way that they go through explaining things almost goes over your head because they're just so smart that they cannot break it down into simple, terms anymore. And what we would find is if we can relate things down into the most simplest forms. What were the questions I had? When I was younger, you wanted to know what on earth is a hedge fund? Like, how does that work? Or what is this? What does KiwiSaver do? If you can break it down into the simplest questions, people will find you because I think there's a misconception that, certain groups of people are scared to learn about money or scared to learn about investing, but I've yet to meet a single woman or person of colour or whoever we're trying to reach who said, I don't really care about money. I think everyone cares about money. Everyone wants to know. Everyone's really eager. I remember I made the Girls That Invest Facebook page. The evening I made it, someone messaged me, a friend of mine. She said, how do you know that I want to learn about the stock market? Like, how did you know that that was something that was going to interest me? And the truth is, we all want to know. We all want to be in a position where we're financially comfortable. We all have the same, hopes and dreams to reach whatever our goals are. So I think half of the battle of trying to get people to be interested is already taken care of. The other half is now just trying to reach them, and I guess that's what we're all here to learn about.
Menorah, what do you think are some ways that the financial services industry can better reach all women and different groups of women?
Yeah, I think I can speak particularly to Pacific women, and I can't emphasise enough taking your financial services to them, exactly to Terina's point. We know that in healthcare, the non-attendance of appointments significantly drops when we take healthcare to the community and deliver care closer to home. I think the same can be said for the financial services industry.
Short and sweet.
Give me 1 second. I had something else to say. Oh, yes. An actionable next step, is that we know that 64% of Pacific Island people reside in Auckland. Of that 64%, half of them live in South Auckland. So if you want to reach Pacific women, deliver your services in South Auckland. Take your services to them. I think it's really crucial to meet people where they're at instead of where you want them to be, because often that difference is where inequity lives.
And Rina, what are your thoughts on how we can better reach and engage with women, including women of colour, Māori and Pacifica communities?
Yeah, I think Sim and Menorah touched on that beautifully, and I did speak on it a little bit earlier about the importance of going to those communities. And for Māori, it would probably be going to the marae. We are all very welcome, by the way. But yeah, really going to those communities, as Menorah said, going out south. But for me, the key part is, okay, once you reach those communities, once you go out to them, how can you make it an empowering interaction? How can you make sure that these communities are feeling heard and feeling valued? And how can you make sure that you can take those learnings and empower change within the very systems that are working against my people? So for me, the key part there is that interaction. It's learning from the communities that you're trying to engage with. And an example that I can give you of this is growing up. Although my parents didn't have much experience with investing or anything like that, they really did give us, my siblings and I, great foundational knowledge in finances. And my mum, she used to give us $5 each, and she would say, okay, it's your job to go and get the food for the day. So for all of us, we'd have $5 each. There's 5 of us siblings. And sometimes if we'd have friends come over, she'd give them $5 as well and say, it's up to you guys. You plan the menu. Your lunch is all on you. She was a great babysitter. Very, very smart. And she would just put it totally on us. So when we'd have some of our Pākehā friends come over, we'd totally be all on ourselves. Oh, okay, I want to get the best thing with my $5. What can I do? How can I contribute the most? And so we'd all go away. I'd get ice blocks. Someone would get a packet of chips, something like that. We'd come to the table. It would all be individual elements that there was no real cohesion there, but it did the job. When my cousins would come over and we'd do the same thing, the mind shift was automatic. It was, okay, how can we pool our money together, use our resources to get the meanest feed we can possibly get. That was our thinking as children. So it's that key difference to me that really highlights the relationship that we have with finances, with money. The Eurocentric or Western way, individualistic way of dealing with money is totally different to how we as Māori view money. We view it as something that can be used for the collective good, something we can pool and use together to help each other. So sometimes the services that you have at the bank, they don't exactly coincide with the values of the communities that you're trying to reach. And it's in those conversations that you'll be having with them that you can really pull out those learnings, but it's up to you guys to then go away and make those meaningful changes to your services so that you can help the people that you're really wanting to help.
Did you want to add something, Sam?
Do you mind if I jump in?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to mention, one of the things that we did, I kind of just got an idea of what you said. One of the things that we did with trying to get people to care about money and trying to get these women to come along, if we gave them this mission of like, come with us and we'll all be rich, no one was going to come. It was not the right way of convincing them that money and investing was important. But we very quickly learnt that, Gen Z women and millennial women really care about impactful ways that they can work with their money and ethical things that they can do with their money. And so we shifted the conversation to, if you come with us, we'll teach you how to be able to make more impact in the world. And so if you reframe what you're trying to achieve with money, you're going to get a lot more to jump on board. And if it's about how you can help your families, how you can help your communities, then you're gonna get a lot more interaction and engagement than we'll put more money in your bank account, which is nice, but there's just no mission that everyone's driven towards.
It's not really about the money, is it? At the end of the day, it's about what you can do with it and where it can take you. Menorah, do you have any thoughts around that? In terms of, looking at money sort of more as a tool and a way to get to where you want to go rather than the balance in your bank account? Is there a way that we could better tap into that and what people want to make of their lives?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
It was a very long one, I'm sorry. I guess the essence of my question is it about the money, and as Sim was saying, the amount of money that you've got in your bank account, or is it more about what you can do with that money?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My family, we've hosted almost, I think, 5 cousins, and I've never through uni, and I've never actually lived in my household with just my immediate family. And so to us, it's not just about sharing resources or wealth, or it's not just about money. If we can get one person through university, it changes the trajectory of an entire family. And so we're not just building a degree, or we're not just, increasing the amount in the bank account. We're trying to change the story and change the narrative for our people. So no, it's not just about money, it's about future generations, it's about how we can empower and enable our communities to live and realise different futures. Because I guess when you were talking, Sim, and you're talking about young people wanting to know about hedge funds, I think I knew more about the benefit than I knew about hedge funds, or I didn't even know that it existed. So I think engaging with people where they're at and using money is not just a tool for creating more capital, knowing that it's actually about building communities is really crucial.
All right, well, those are most of the questions that I had for you, but I'm going to turn now to the questions that have come through Slido, and if you do have any more, please send them through. A question here from Jono: how do we make investing financial information more accessible to women and lower socioeconomic people? I feel like we've already touched a bit on this, but does anyone want to pick up that question?
The way that we reach more women and people from low socioeconomic backgrounds when we speak about investing, because that's kind of the main topic that we talk on, it really is just, showing up consistently every day and saying, hey, look, this is the services that we offer. Hey, look, this is how we do it. But we also go into the communities. We also turn up to events. We recently went to like the Papakura Youth Council and hosted an event for 14 to 16-year-olds and taught them about the stock market. And it's things like that if you go out there and do that, it's got such a knock-on effect, because then these kids go home and they tell their parents about it and they tell their friends and family about it. I remember the first time, I guess it was quite young, but the first time I learnt about investing or shares was a girl in my playground at school in year 5 was like, this is something my dad taught me. And I said, well, I want to know that too. So it's just those, if you get a little seed in there, it spreads, and that's just how you reach people, just getting into those communities.
I'd like to jump on that a little bit. I think it's also knowing your communities, and one thing that brings us together is food. So if you're wanting to reach those people, put on a feed for them. Make them I don't want to say bribe them with food, but it's a really good way to break the ice and to get to know each other. It's a commonality that we all have. We all need sustenance. So why don't we break bread and kind of dig into those deeper conversations together? But it's also about finding the needs of those communities. So if you have a community that you want to reach and they need something, they need school books or they need transport, look at how you can pool your resources, even if it's not just you as one business, but across businesses, how we can work together to make that happen in those communities. Because when you're a 5-year-old child at a school, you don't really care about money all that much. You care about how can I go to the pools after school, or how can I put my books in something so that I can take them to school. And they're not going to remember much about the money talks that you'll have with them or the shares talks that you'll have with them, but they'll remember the school bag that they were given so that they could put their books in their bag and go to school. They'll remember that these banks or these whatever, they pulled their resources to get us a bus or a van so that we could go on this school trip. So it's also about that reciprocal relationship. How can you give back to the communities as well?
Sorry, Sarah, you go.
No, right. I was just going to add on to that and say that absolutely, and when you're going into these communities or even trying to access a certain audience, no matter what that audience is, coming back to never assuming that they know anything or should know anything or there is any situation that you understand fully, because often it's never what you actually assume or think it is about any particular person or their experience. And I think starting at ground zero or meeting them where they're at, understanding their situation as much as you can, and then acting from there, I think is important with zero assumptions.
If I could jump in on that too. Specifically for Pacific people, one of our core values is collectivism. So more often than not, if you're wanting to engage with Pacific people, it'd be finding the hubs where they sort of congregate towards. I tried to go out for breakfast with one of my cousins. I'm one of 3 girls, and she's one of 4 girls, and so I tried to just get her on her own because I wanted to catch up with her, and I genuinely looked to my left and both our groups of siblings followed us to said cafe, and I just was like, can we not have this one-on-one conversation? They said absolutely not. And so I think like finding those hubs, whether it be like practically like churches or there's like AUT South Campus where they run heaps of wonderful events to connect with the community. More often than not, you'll not just find one person, but them, their siblings, their auntie, their uncle, and you'll be able to connect with the entire family in a really meaningful way.
Brilliant responses there, thank you. Another question that's come through: what should non-Māori organisations do to engage? Ooh, it's just dropped back down. But I think the essence of the question, I'm getting lost in Slido. What can non-Māori organisations do to engage Māori communities and people?
I think a key one here is representation within your business as well. So it's definitely hiring more Māori as a starting point. We're great, honestly. I would really recommend hiring us. But it's also looking within your business. So I can guarantee that you probably have some Māori within your business, or you have people with the capability. It's also about empowering those within your organisation. So you shouldn't have to come to a summit to be inspired by a panel who sit here for an hour and think, okay, this is what I need to do, this is how I need to change. You should be able to look internally at the people that you work with every day and see the need there. You should be able to have those open conversations so that you can see the need within your own organisation and know that you have the capability to bring in Māori. Because often we are sought after now. It's very valuable to have Māori in your teams, and we know that we can bring a lot to the table. But it's also hard when people are saying, here's our doors, come through them, and when you walk through those doors, the environment isn't safe for us. It isn't culturally safe, it isn't psychologically safe. The groundwork hasn't been done to ensure that our lived experiences are valued in those spaces. So while it's great to pull in more Māori, there also needs to be some work done internally to ensure that the spaces are safe for us and that it's a conducive environment.
And a somewhat related question to that, this comes from Latavia, wherever Latavia is. Thanks for your question. Her question for Menorah and to Rina is, how important is it to acknowledge the extra labour by Pacifica and Māori to educate their colleagues? Should they be paid?
Good question. Good question. I was just thinking about this with that prior question, and I think it's really important for when non-Māori organisations try to engage with Māori, that first and foremost recognising Te Tiriti as a living document that we respect and we honour, and I guess making a commitment from the top to integrate treaty principles in everything that you do. We have really high accountability at the hospital, and I say this as a Te Whatu Ora employee, but these views are my own, that we must always report back on equity and also integrate partnership, protection and participation of Māori people in all of our projects and all of our processes, instead of it just being an idea. And back to the question, which I've completely forgotten.
Let me find it. Latavia's submitted a few questions, so I've got to... Here we go. How important is it to acknowledge the extra labour by Pacifica and Māori to educate their colleagues, and should they be paid?
Yes, and to that point, that capability of Māori or Pacific knowledge shouldn't be held by just one group of people or one team. It should be a capability possessed by all employees, and particularly from the top. I'm not sure if they should be paid more, if we should be paid more.
Yes,
I'd love to be.
Yeah.
I guess that's the humility, saying, I don't mind. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I can kind of jump in there. I completely agree with everything that Menorah said. Often the yoke or the burden does fall on the minorities in the room to uphold diversity and to encourage diversity. And it's something that happens sometimes because the other people in the room just don't have the capability. But that excuse can only take you so far. It has to come to a point when, okay, I don't have the capability, but these are the people that I've been relying on. They're my crutches, and they're actually earning a lot less than me. So how can I empower them? If I can't pay them more in this role, how can I get them into roles where their voice is heard across tables, across teams? How can I empower them so they can empower change in this organisation? So it's really up to you as an individual to want to do more, to want to be better, but it's also up to you to empower those around you. And if you're finding yourself constantly relying on people to shoulder the burden of diversity and to bring more diversity into the organisation, then empower them, pay them what they're worth, see their value and raise it. Because I can guarantee you that if you are valuing your employees, if you're paying them what they are worth, then you are going to see results that are just over and above anything that they've already brought to the table so far.
Now, we've probably got a number of insurers in the room, so I'm guessing this question has come from one of you. What do our panellists think insurers can do to connect better to young customers to promote financial independence and financial future? Anyone want to tackle this one? I know we're not from an insurance background, but...
I'm happy to take this on. So my co-host Sonia, also my best friend, she came from an insurance background. So she was one of those people that it was really interesting to begin with, because it's true, a lot of young people don't understand the importance of insurance. Insurance is important in so many parts of our lives and many different types of insurance, but for some reason, it's not information that trickles down to us or that we speak about in our circles. We don't really go for brunch and go like, what kind of insurance do you have? Or should I, take up life insurance, or should I take up contents insurance? What can I even get from contents insurance? So, and it was just really interesting with Sonia. She used to work at Southern Cross, and I would say, insurance, and she'd be like, no, insurance is so important. You really have to have it. And it was just this interesting dialogue of, if someone comes into your space and tells you why something is important and breaks it down for you, then it just makes sense. It's really just about getting into those, spaces. Everyone should honestly be having insurance and considering it and knowing what options are out there, but it's just not something that we think we need to do. It feels like one of those things you do when you're older. You get a mortgage when you're older, you get insurance when you're older, but as everyone knows, that's not the case. But how do you actually get into those communities? I guess that's just what we've been speaking about, trying to go to where you think those people are going to be once you can explain the importance of it in a way that is very simplified. I can't imagine a single person going, I don't want insurance.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I think another one similar to insurance that we tend not to have conversations about is estate planning. And I never even thought about estate planning until I spoke to someone who I was going to get on the podcast, and they were like, oh yeah, estate planning is really important. I was like, what is that? And they're like, what do you mean, what is that? Like, if you need to plan, because if you're leaving assets to someone and et cetera, those sorts of things. And it's just another thing lumped in with that because we're young, we've got all the time in the world. This isn't something we really have to be worrying about. But understanding the benefit there is to having things like insurance and your estate planning planned out for your family and those people who rely on you and that sort of thing is so important. And I think how to do that, again, echoing what Sim has said in the sense of what we've spoken about previously, as well as how do you make that relatable to right now, because it's a future thing. How do you make it relatable to someone right now? And I've seen a couple of advisors actually out there, those that have personal brands on Instagram and stuff, go you, and I would encourage so many more to do the same thing, to actually try and put yourself out there so that people can see you. But I can see them trying to make that more relatable to young people now, and I think it's thinking about us where we're at, as we've sort of spoken about.
I'm kind of going to jump in here as well and throw myself under the bus because I don't have insurance, and it's something that I've recently, it's something that I've had to learn the hard way. So my partner and I, we recently, at the beginning of the year, we bought a new vehicle. It was $20,000. We bought it cash because I don't believe in afterpay. Or anything like that, but he comes from a background where afterpay was the norm. If you don't have anything but you need it, you get it now no matter what. And so we come from quite different backgrounds, and that in itself has been a challenge. It's a totally different conversation. But anyway, we bought a vehicle, $20,000 cash. It's like 2016 Mazda CX-5, and I thought, safe, we'll be fine, 2016. No, we were not fine. It needed a new engine, and it was going to cost $17,000, and we did not have insurance. I went back to where we got it from, won't say, but don't get it from Turner's. And I kind of went through the systems, and we did it that way, and we're actually getting the vehicle next week, and it's not costing us a thing. And I kind of went through all of the, you owe us a duty of care, and all my kind of com law came back from uni. But it was then, this week, that I learned, I need insurance. And I said, okay, babe, we need insurance. What is going to suit our needs as individuals, as a couple, or even as a household? Where can we look? And I still don't know the answers, to be honest. So if there are any insurers in the room that want to get talking about, not just about what insurance I need, but about how we can better put the messaging out there to young people like me. Because I'm 23 years old, I work corporate at Fonterra, I've had jobs at banks, I've had jobs in tourism, and I've been working since I was 13, but I still don't have insurance, and I still don't know where to look. So it's a really great question, and I'd love to explore it with you so that we have people like me who are smarter, hopefully, and have insurance and don't have to go through the nightmare of having to use their Suzuki Swift for 5 months to get around the country because they didn't have insurance. So it's a really, really great question, and I think it is super important, but I don't have the answers, and I would actually love to figure that out with you so that we can help some more people who, like me, wouldn't really see the value in insurance, but after that kind of personal experience, now know better.
All right, any insurers in the room? Tarina's going to be here after the session. Come and get her. All right, I just want to wrap up this session. I know there were so many questions coming through and we unfortunately don't have time to get to all of them, but hopefully over lunch you can have a chat and ask the questions to the panellists directly. I'm going to finish up with one final question, and you know it's coming, so hopefully you've prepared something for people to take away. What is one single action that you would all challenge the people here in this room today to take to improve women's financial well-being? Who would like to begin?
I guess this is a bit of a biased one, but I would challenge everyone to try and see if your organisation can get better at social media and get better at being in front of people's faces, because if you want to attract young people or people of colour, women of colour, yes, physically going to the spaces as we've talked about, that would be great, but you can't do that every single day, but you can be on social media every single day. That's what we did, and the reach that social media has is absolutely outstanding. I feel like that's not new information, but, you know, Sonia and I, we started a little brand from our bedrooms and it reached the #1 business podcast in the US. How does that happen? Through social media. These are things that if we can do them, organisations can do them in New Zealand very easily. It's just about, you know, setting aside a little bit more time to see how can we reach these people. We're on TikTok all the time. You know, find us there. You'll find them very easily.
I think to Dr. Pushpa's point, it would simply be to just do it. There's been a wealth of recommendations and actions to take away from this conference. So I implore you to do it. Invest into the initiatives and invest into the actions that have been recommended. Invest into social media and ensure that it's done. So when we come to the conference next year or the year after, you can report back on those benefits and see if we've shifted the dial for women. So yeah, that would be my one action, is to do it.
My challenge would be, how are you building trust with those people who are not actively seeking out your services? And I think, to Sim's point, getting better at social media is so key, because so many financial advisors, of course, a lot of their business relies on relationships and building those relationships with people. So how are you doing that in an online environment? Because most of us young people are hiding in our rooms. We are scared to talk to someone about our bank statements. I definitely don't want to. So how are you building that trust online and with those people who aren't necessarily actively seeking you out?
Amazing advice, ladies. My kind of challenge to you all, I would really urge you all, when you go back to your offices, look around you. When you go back to these spaces, either the offices or just environments where you hold space, especially if it's in a leadership capacity, look around you. If the people that you see look like you, you're not doing your job properly. If the people that you see are the same race or the same gender or come from the same socioeconomic background, you're not doing your job properly. And that shouldn't be something that's hugely confronting, although I know that it is. It should be a challenge that you look to improve. Okay, it is what it is. How can I do better? How can I bring people up the ranks? How can I empower the interns, the brown interns that we got in because we need to bolster our diversity? I know that people do that, let's not lie. But how can we bring them up the ranks? How can we give them pay raises? How can we bring them to the table? And often people are saying, oh, give us a seat at the table. Give us the whole damn table, please. It's a really, for me it seems so simple, but I know it's a lot harder than that. It's about valuing the differences within your own businesses. It's about valuing the diversity, but also it's about changing your hiring structures so that you're not just bringing in the same people that look exactly like you. Otherwise, your results aren't going to change. They're just going to stay the same.
So I challenged all of our speakers up here the other week to put out the challenge to everyone in the room, and I think they've definitely done that, and I just want to thank you all for your honesty and your just being so candid about what needs to change, because we need voices and perspectives like yours, and I'm sure everyone in the room has taken something away from this session. So thank you again to each of you, Menorah, Sim, Sarah and Rina, for all of your thoughts and perspectives, and to everyone who submitted questions. Just following on from those challenges that they've thrown out there, I'd encourage everyone in the room today to consider some of the issues that have been raised in this session and the solutions that our panellists have posed, and how you can draw on their perspectives to continue to drive equitable outcomes for women, for minorities, in your own organisations and in New Zealand beyond this campaign and beyond this event today. Please join me in thanking our panellists.